The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our discussion on company settings and defaults in Design Manager. My name is Brad, and I'll be hosting the demonstration today. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to enter them in the questions pane under GoToWebinar panel. If the question is outside of the scope of today's discussion, please email them to support@designmanager.com. Lastly, if you miss a portion of our webinar or want to review any of our past discussions, go to our YouTube channel at Design Manager Inc., Design Manager INC. And here you can see a complete listing of all sorts of topics, including our quick start videos, short helpful tutorials, and all of our comprehensive webinars, which we categorize into our project management and accounting courses, along with all of our other weekly webinars as well. Now, in this week's webinar, we'll be reviewing the numerous settings and configurations available in ProCloud to hone the software to your business model and your particular needs. To that end, let's discuss the overall philosophy of company settings in Design Manager. Company level configurations are divided into two related categories. First would be the singular setting that allows you to define the manner in which Design Manager operates according to your business model. Secondly, would be the particular settings that you want pre-configured for each project in Design Manager, effectively using the company settings as a template for all new projects. Now, this concept warrants a bit more explanation on defaults in general in Design Manager. As we'll see, settings can be configured first at the company level. These settings then default or inherit to each new project. At the project level, however, you can make any individual adjustments to those settings based upon the needs of a particular client. From the project, settings then inherit down to each item and component. Again, such settings can be overridden as necessary. So essentially, default settings allow you to determine how each project and specifications are initially configured, but you can always override the defaults as necessary. As many of such settings can be considered sensitive, we allow access to them to be easily restricted via the password system by encapsulating all of them on the company information window accessed off your file menu. So let's go ahead and check it out. So we'll bring up our Design Manager Professional, click on File, and then we go to Company Information and Settings. Let's first discuss the non-default settings in ProCloud that are used as configuration tools, restriction, accounting preferences, etc., that pertain to the company as a whole. What we won't be discussing, however, is the series of company settings, and there are numerous, that allow you to customize the overall appearance and what information is displayed on documents such as your proposal, your invoice, your purchase order, etc. These such settings are discussed specifically in our Documents, Styles, and Options webinar, which again, you can find right on our YouTube channel. Okay, let's begin with the default sales, cost of goods sold, and other accounts, which we can see our sales and cost of goods sold accounts is our first tab listed next to our company tab. This will be a somewhat brief discussion of these concepts because I explained it in detail on another webinar called our Sales Categories and Component Types Explained. So I'll just be reviewing the concepts in a very top-down explanation today when I'll go into much greater detail on a previous webinar. Okay, sales or revenue accounts and your cost of goods sold accounts. These are the accounts that are used for each component type when sales categories are not used or entered on a particular item. Well, what does all of that mean? First, what are component types? And you can see them listed along the left-hand side of your revenue and sales accounts and your cost of goods sold accounts: merchandise, freight, crating, installation, labor, etc. Component types allow you to classify the goods and services which you purchase from your vendor. Well, why would you want to do so? Many reasons. Certain types of goods or services are taxed differently. One may be taxed, one may be not taxed, or at different rates. Perhaps there are pricing differences with differing goods and services. You want to mark up merchandise to a certain degree and you want to mark up freight, not at all or to a lesser degree, etc. These also allow you to have different types of tracking information customizable based upon your component type. Again, these are explained at length in the sales categories and component types webinar, which I just displayed. Further, component types, excluding merchandise and time, those are specialized. All of the others, however, can be customized, as we'll see later on in the discussion. Well, if those are component types, what are sales categories? Well, sales categories allow you to classify the good or service to the client. And doing so allows you to ensure proper accounting, reporting, etc. Sales categories are accessed off of your accounting tab onto your lists and glossaries, and you can see the option right there for sales categories, and there they are. And if we use, let's say, furniture as an example, notice that they have the same array of sales and cost of goods sold accounts listed here. Very similar to what we see on our company window. The sales category, however, essentially overrides the settings from the company window. And that all occurs on the specifications. Just pull up a project here real quick as an example. You can see right on the item window the area to input a sales category. Okay, now further, Design Manager can actually be configured to enforce sales categories during specification entering, which in fact is the default how the system is configured, and we'll see that again in a little while. So if we're not using sales categories, these are the default revenue and sales and cost of goods sold accounts that will be used on a per component type basis. Next, let's jump over to our other accounts tab. These are very specialized accounts in Pro Cloud for maintaining fiscal activity for varying types of transactions in the software. Big word of advice and warning here. Do not touch these accounts without first consulting with your accounting professional, and second, if need be, with the Design Manager technical support team, as doing so can result into some very negative accounting situations if the wrong type of account or the accounts are changed improperly. Okay, so this is just a reflection and a review of what these various accounts do, but changing them should always be done, obviously, with some care. So with that being said, we have them all categorized in 4 different areas: payable accounts, receivable accounts, inventory, and general ledger. And I'll go through each of them in brief. Let's start with our payable accounts. We have 3. We have our vendor deposit asset account. This is the account that's used to accumulate all of the deposits that you have sent to your vendor prior to their application on a future vendor invoice. Next, vendor discounts. If the vendor has nicely given you a discount on a particular order, this is going to be the cost of goods sold. Sometimes it's an expense account, but a cost of goods sold account into which that discount will be reflected on your income statement. Next, and very importantly, your accounts payable account. This is the account, the liability account that accumulates all of the bills that you have entered from your vendors that have not yet been remitted payment. So all of the unpaid bills in Design Manager go into your accounts payable, as is classically the case. Next, let's jump to our receivable accounts, starting with our accounts receivable. This is an asset account, and this is the sum of all of the client invoices that you have recorded for which the client has not paid in full. Next, and very importantly, the client deposit account. This is a liability account that's going to track and maintain all the funds that you have received from your clients, either as a retainer or as a client deposit prior to their application on future invoices as well. Finance charges. Design Manager Professional Cloud allows you to have a finance charge system where you can actually easily and automatically create finance charge invoices for those invoices that the client have yet not paid. That's going to be a revenue account, as you can see, as indicated by the 40,000 nomenclature there, or the numbering system, and that will appear on your income statement if you so choose to enact finance charges for your clients. Finally, on your receivable accounts is the undeposited funds account. This is the asset account, which will contain all of the checks or cash or what other types of payments you have received that has not yet been actually transferred or taken to the banking institution. So it's undeposited, and it'll ultimately have a deposit slip generated for it, come out of the undeposited funds into the appropriate checking or cash account. Jumping down to inventory accounts. If your company or your design firm has a sizable inventory, that's an asset account, of course, and all of the inventory through Design Manager's inventory system will be maintained in the inventory asset account. We actually have an inventory freight account as well. If you are making purchases for your inventory to restock, or for purchases you may have made at market, etc., you may desire to have the freight of that inventory tracked separately. That would also be another asset account. But as you see here, I've elected to have those two accounts and those two types of transactions go simply into my singular inventory account. Very similar to inventory is the concept of work in process, another asset account. Work in process represents all of the bills that you have recorded from your vendors for project-related goods, or in other words, vendor invoices on your project purchase orders that have not yet been invoiced to the client. So you have paid for that merchandise or service, but have not yet billed the client for it, and that will be accumulated in your work in process account, a very important concept in your Design Manager Pro Cloud. Finally, two specialized accounts under General Ledger. They are retained earnings. Retained earnings is an equity account and represents the sum of all of your net income from prior years. And lastly, the suspense account. Think of that often as a clearing account or a swap account that's used primarily to process accounting transactions between balance sheet accounts and income statement accounts without getting too technical on the accounting side of things. So as you can see, perhaps some of that information or some of those accounts seem very foreign to you. You do not want to go in here and change those, but having a good working knowledge of those accounts is very important to your overall business model. Okay, other accounts. Since we're speaking about accounts like undeposited funds, let's jump over to our AR and Showroom tab next. This tab on your company information window has many uses. Primarily, however, is the ability to input your payment types. Well, what are payment types? And you can see them listed on our cash receipt payment type grid right in the center of that tab. Payment types are used to when entering in various cash receipts, and by using the payment types, it really makes it much easier to classify the receipt. In other words, was it a check? Was it a credit card? Is it cash, etc.? Selecting that appropriate payment type then allows your Pro Cloud to always record the funds into the appropriate cash checking account. What does all of that mean? Well, many times design firms might have multiple checking or banking accounts, money market account, operating account, savings account, what have you. And they prefer to have various types of transactions go into those particular accounts automatically. Let's imagine that checks in cash from our clients always go into our operating account, or all of our credit card transactions from our clients may go into our money market account, or what have you. Now, rather than having ourselves or the other Design Manager users remember which account to use each time that type of transaction comes in, Design Manager allows them to simply select the appropriate method of payment from the client and let Design Manager do all the accounting behind the scenes. And we can see that in action if we jump over to our accounting tab. Let's move our company information window over for a second. We'll go to our cash receipt. And if I click the add button, you can see our payment type selection is right along the top there, where I would select any of those various payment types that I've created on my AR and showroom tab on my company information window. Now further, while we're on our cash receipts window, the payment types also very conveniently group receipts by payment type on the checkbook window and other areas throughout the program. So we can see on my cash receipts window, new tab, I've entered a few various receipts from my clients, all of which were paid via their Visa. And you can see I've selected the Visa payment type on all three. So if I go ahead and post these, yes, I will accept that. Design Manager is going to process the transactions for us. So they drop off our new tab. And as you're probably familiar, they're going to now appear on our existing tab. There they are, 2 from the Hilsons, 1 from the Carters. But in our checkbook, let's go to our accounts payable frame, checkbook and reconcile. On the date of our Visa transactions, 10/7, I have a singular, 10/6, I have a singular entry. But that 7,819.70 is all of those singular transactions. This is very convenient because when you actually get your statement from the banking institution, particularly with credit card transactions, they're all going to appear as a consolidated or aggregated entry on your bank statement. So having Design Manager do the same for you on your checkbook window, it makes your reconciliations much easier. It makes looking at the checkbook window itself much clearer and much more corresponding to what your bank actually is showing on their websites and their statements, etc. Very handy feature of the payment types in general. Okay. Further, speaking about our payment types, we can also configure certain payment types to use that concept of undeposited funds, which I briefly touched upon when we were looking at our other accounts. If a payment type is associated or selected to use undeposited funds, which we can see here, receipts will first appear in the undeposited funds selection, which is very common for checks, cash, etc. Anytime I use, in this case, the check payment type, all of those will first accumulate in our undeposited funds account and on our cash receipt window, make bank deposit tab. And they're going to remain there until we actually process a deposit slip where we're now indicating we've physically gone to the bank and deposited the funds. And this whole process allows us to record receipts into ProCloud when they're received from the client, so they're not overlooked or we don't lose the check, etc. And then allow us to accumulate them all, and perhaps on Friday or Monday or what have you, we actually go to the bank with our deposit slip. And we can see that, again, as I said, on our cash receipts window, make bank deposit, we can see I have a single check there from the Hilsons. If I had multiple or many checks, they would all accumulate here, and then I could actually go ahead and print and process a deposit slip. Now, as payment types, deposit slips, all of these types of concepts certainly warrant longer discussion. There is another webinar that we've created, our accounting course for receiving payments, where I go into great detail of those processes and really explore how they can work for you. Okay, back on our company information. Let's jump over to our fiscal month tab. Now, there's obviously some very important information on this particular tab, so let's go through some of the features here. Let's start with our last closed fiscal month. In ProCloud, you can set a closed month for each various fiscal department, such as accounts receivable, accounts payable, and general ledger. They can all be closed on different dates, and let's explore what is meant by each one. So when I have my accounts receivable functioned, that's going to be cash receipts, client invoices, etc. So once all of my invoices are done and all my receipts are in for a particular month, and I don't want any transactions to affect those particular accounts, I can set the account, the fiscal month, as being closed. So with my AR, my accounts receivable closed fiscal month of 8/12 of 8/2019, I can't input any transaction into the month of fiscal 8 or before, nor could I even void or edit any transactions that are equal to or prior to that fiscal month. I'd have to do all of my entries into any month later than that particular fiscal month. Very handy to do so, so you preserve the integrity of all of your accounting transactions. Particularly important at the end of your fiscal year, after your account professional has done all of your taxes, you may want to at least close off the prior fiscal year, so you don't inadvertently void a check or input a transaction into a prior fiscal year, because now your accounting is no longer going to match what all the reports the accountant used to send off to your various tax authorities, IRS, etc. So accounts receivable functions include client invoices, cash receipts, etc. Accounts payable would be the entering of all of your bills and invoices, would be entering of checks. And finally, the general ledger selection really pertains to journal entries. And again, each can be set independently of one another. Next, we have a few options that are pertaining really to credit card and checking accounts. First, we have the option, allow posting prior to the calendar date of the last reconciliation. This is going to indicate whether or not a user can post an entry into a cash account or a banking account with a date that's prior to the date of the last reconciliation. What does that mean? Well, we've gone through the process of reconciling our account and processed that in our accounts payable functions. So if I've already done that and reconciled my design manager transactions to my physical bank statement, it somewhat defies convention, or defies logic even, that I'd be putting an entry in prior to that reconciliation date. In other words, how can I have reconciled properly if I'm putting in a transaction in that's now changing that reconciliation amount? Similarly, we have the option of allow unclearing of checkbook or credit card entries. Again, if the reconciliation process for your checkbook or credit card accounts has been finished, unclearing or marking any transaction to be no longer reconciled, again, somewhat defies convention. Are there times we need to make some corrections? Absolutely. But that's why both of these options are set as unchecked by default. We do allow you to come in here and select them if you need to make any adjusting entries, of course. Now, both of these are a company-wide setting, not by user. So anyone with access to the checkbook, to writing checks, to making cash receipts, could post entries into a date prior to the last reconciliation, or they could unclear entries, etc. So again, use those options with great care. Now we have two options for the defaulting of fiscal months in Design Manager. Your Pro Cloud allows your company to have a non-calendar fiscal year end. In other words, let's say the company's fiscal year may not end in December, but it ends in April or something along those lines. It's the fiscal month of the transaction that determines where the activity appears on your financial statements, not the calendar date. So we have options to allow you to select how you want your fiscal months defaulted. And here they are. We have default fiscal month to the current fiscal month below. That's the most common and is the default. So all of my accounting windows will be using the current fiscal month as indicated in the bottom right corner. In our case, 10 of 19. And if we take a look at, our vendor invoices window, there in our top left corner, we can see, just as I said, the fiscal month is dating at 10/19. Now, the other option is default fiscal month to 1 plus the closed month. The use +1 method is desirable when the accounting entry trails behind the current fiscal month, as it commonly will do in larger firms. Let's say the accounting team is still entering in information for fiscal 9 of 19, early into the October months like we are now. Once they're finished, they would then change their fiscal months to reflect that. And what Design Manager will then do is use 1 plus that month. So if all of my April work is, all of my fiscal 8 work is completed, and I'm still finishing up my fiscal 9 entries, using the 1 plus method will then default our fiscal month to 9 of 19. Let's see that in action. I'm going to save that change, jump back on our bills and invoices, and now, rather than the current fiscal month of 10/19, we can see our accounting entry is defaulting to 9. Obviously, that's going to require the accounting team to properly close the months, mark them as closed in our company information window, etc. But very handy when those situations do arise to ensure that you're posting in to the proper fiscal period. Okay, very interesting and handy features on the fiscal month tab. We talked about our AR payment types. Let's jump over to our accounts payable payment types. Now, much like our cash receipt payment types can categorize receipts, accounts payable payment types allow you to group or classify the company bills, expenses, deposits by the, let's call it, anticipated method of payment. So if I enter an operating expense as an example, go back to our bills and invoices, go ahead and add, and I said operating expense. If we look in the bottom right of the vendor deposit invoice and operating expense window with our pay with selection, we can see we have selections for a check, later with the Amex or American Express, online bill pay, and there's actually our American Express credit card account. So all of our accounts payable payment types are listed first, followed by any credit card liability accounts that we have created. We have American Express as one of our options, and you can see on our chart of accounts, there's my American Express credit card account. So all of those will be listed as well. Your defined accounts payable payment types will be listed first, followed by your credit card accounts in account number order. Now, let's take a look. As I said on our the ability to use your payment type to classify the anticipated method of payment comes in very handy on our payments and checks window. We can see there's our pay with selection there for us. So if I'm in the process of going through and actually submitting payments for all the bills I usually pay online, I can use my pay with menu to filter. And now I can focus on my online bill pay. I can make my selections and go ahead and process with my pay online button as well. Very handy way to classify all of your bills in the method that you anticipate to pay them. And if we want to add one as an example, very easy to do. Just click the add button as indicated by the green plus sign. Put in a type or description, or basically how is the payment going to actually process. Let's use, how about debit card as an example. Select the default payment account. Usually, debit card's a very easy example because that'll be coming from a specific banking institution, but any type of cash checking account you have can be listed here, even your credit card accounts as well. So if we're going to pay later with Amex, you can see we've selected that. But our debit card's going to come out of our cash checking. If we click OK, there's our payment type created. Now that might be one of the methods that I often that I use in least frequently. So I can actually reorder my accounts payment types as well. So just by clicking the down or up arrows, I can move the order of each of our payment types as well. If we save that, go back to our bills and invoices, And we'll do our operating expense example again. Back to our pay with. There's my debit card, newly created payment type. And as you can see, I moved that down the list in priority. Very handy way to classify all of your bills for easy payment. Okay. Back on our company information window. Let's now hop over to our purchase and work order options. Just a few features here. Most commonly used is the purchase order terms and conditions. These are going to be all the legalese or various information you want to convey to all of your vendors, and that will print right at the bottom of your purchase order. So I have some very boilerplate information typed into my purchase order conditions that I've received from my legal team. Pop that right into my purchase order conditions, and it'll automatically print on all of my purchase orders. Further, it'll automatically update as well if I need to make any changes over time. The other options, we have a default purchase order email message. If you're using Design Manager's purchase order emailing system, that will be the email, that will be the message that's included by default on all of those email transactions to the vendor. And the same with our fax system as well. You could have fax cover page remarks. Now, a few other tabs all have warranted their own webinars in the past. So let me quickly show you where you can find some of that information. First, we have our both our item status and our project schedule can be found on our status codes and project schedule in DM Pro, a very quick, handy webinar there. The budget is all addressed in our budgets in Pro Cloud, where I go into how all the company-wide budgets can be created for you. And of course, inventory will be covered on our inventory webinar. Logo will be covered in our documents and styles that we saw at the beginning as well. So all of those have their own sets of webinars. Rather than going into minor detail here, I extrapolate on them a lot in much greater detail in their own respective webinars. Okay, lots of information on the company information window by itself. Let's move on now to some of the features that Design Manager considers the advanced options. Tucked even a little farther away, we go back to our company tab and click on our advanced button. The print options, the vast majority of these are all going to be covered in our document styles and options webinar, but I'm going to focus on a few that aren't. Oh, further, you can always, remember, use the help system in your Pro Cloud. It'll describe each of these individual options for you, and that's throughout the software. So it's all well documented. If you ever have a question, just click the help button. So a few things here. Under report options, we have the trim printer alignment. This is specific to the printing of your checks and your 1099 information. This will allow you to either raise or lower the alignment on your checks and your 1099 documents in case they're a little bit off of the particular forms. Speaking of the checks themselves, our preferred document provider, Nelco, we have crafted all of our checks for their format, and they have 3 different types, where the check itself is either in the middle with a stub on the top and the bottom, or 2 other options, where the check is on the top followed by 2 stubs, or 2 stubs followed by the check. And you can make that selection here. Timestamp, whether or not to have the exact date and moment in time printed on each of your reports. Very handy when looking at particularly accounting or your financial statements. If you printed a income statement, let's say for, I don't know, the prior fiscal year in April of the current year, and then printed it again in August of the current calendar year, and you notice some differences, it's going to be very handy to say to yourself, okay, some of those accounts changed between April and August of this year. That wouldn't happen if you set your closed fiscal months as we saw. Timestamp Keep item description together. This again goes into greater detail on some of our proposal and invoice webinars and our document styles, but this selection will force Design Manager to prevent an item description for quote unquote breaking between pages on your proposal, on your invoice, etc. So if there's a very verbose description that you don't want the client to read at the bottom of one page, followed by continuing on the top of the other, that would be the default selection to do so. Again, that could be changed on a per item basis on various windows described elsewhere. Show your status color. This is going to appear on certain reports, whether or not to show the item status colors on those particular reports. Really, you're trying to save yourself your color ink. So that option can be turned off and on when printing a few reports. Similarly, the alternate highlight row. Design Manager will have a shaded bar on most of your reports to assist in clarity of reading, and you can turn that off and on, and you can even select the color. By default, we have a very light gray, but you could change that to whatever you would like. Finally, our client status dates. These are the up to 3 different status dates that can optionally be shown on your client status report, a report intended to provide to your client to show how particular items are progressing financially through their design process, etc. And you can see you have a whole variety of various dates you can select, and we give you the ability to show the clients what you would like and in what order. Let's jump over to the General tab. Again, these are some very system-wide settings used to customize your Pro Cloud for your company's business model. And again, that will default down to all of your new projects where they can then be customized again. To demonstrate that fact, let's jump over to our projects. Let's edit our Carter's Pennington home. On our project window, we would go to defaults and then advanced here, and notice very similar array of options between your company advanced options and the project advanced options. The company is used as that quote unquote template, and then we can customize on a per project basis. Okay, so we'll go through the main selections and options on the General tab, as they are fairly important. First, we talked about our component types. Remember how I said that we can change certain component types? Merchandise and time, those are fixed, they're specialized. But I may not have any need for crating, perhaps, and I want to have something as, how about a purchasing fee? I have a design fee, and now I have a purchasing fee as well. And the moment I tab through, notice crating is now purchasing fee throughout the system. Then we have the ability to customize various pricing and other features on a per component type basis. How do we want to do our pricing model for each of our component types? We can mark up the cost, we can discount off of list, or in the case of various fees, we can even have a percentage of a cost, such as a design fee. And then the particular percentages for each as well. Remember, company-wide default can always be changed on a per project basis, and further, I can always change the markup on a per item basis to whatever I desire. This just ensures consistency in all of your project creation, and it really aids in data entry as well. I don't, if I'm a designer, I don't need to always remember to put in 35%, 30%, 10% here. Design Manager will handle those defaults for us. Include and deposit, which, if any or all, of the various component types should be included when I'm calculating the requested deposit amount for my client, displayed on my proposal, etc. Auto. The auto option we'll see momentarily. That will create a component type that is selected as auto for every merchandise component that you have. What do I mean by that? Well, notice merchandise can't be auto because that's the quote unquote parent component. But for every merchandise component that I have, I may want Design Manager to assist me in creating a freight, or I may want to always have a design fee associated with that particular parent component. Rather than having to add it myself manually, this will allow us to do so. Now, I've crafted our Carter project in that method, and I can demonstrate how that works quickly. So we can see I have selected as my design fee set to auto for me at 35%. In that pricing model, if we go to the specifications for our Carter Pennington home, and I add a new one, notice on our component window, let's put our sales category in, Design Manager has crafted a secondary component of design fee automatically for me. Even better, when I put in my cost, say, make it an even $1,000 for simplicity, the sell price of that merchandise component, the exact same, but Design Manager's crafting my fee for me. And just like that, I've created a secondary or auto component, which is even associated or linked to the parent component itself. Very handy method if you want to use design fee, if design fee may be taxed differently than your merchandise, which is certainly the case in some areas, or if you want design fee to be listed differently on your proposal or invoice to the client, you would use that selection. Okay. A few of our other options as we see along our options area on the general tab. Let's go through these briefly as the last topic we'll be discussing today. Include tax in deposit. When you're proposing to your client, do you want that requested deposit amount to be based upon the tax as well or not? Certainly can do so. Show discount. What that will do is on your proposal and invoice, the verbiage to the effect of a discount of X has been deducted from the list price of Y. So you're showing your client your discount amount. How much are they saving by going with you? Similarly, the show markup. That's going to say something to the effect of the price includes a cost of X plus a design fee or whatever selection I have of Y. So your client is seeing their original cost and your design fee as well. Bypass work in process. If you do not want the purchases that we discussed a little while ago on our work in process account, if we don't want the cost to first be accumulated in our work in process account until we invoice the client, and rather go directly to your cost of goods sold, that is configured here. Now, if that terminology sounds unfamiliar, I highly suggest do not select bypass work in process, nor to do so unless you consult with your accounting professional first so they understand the ramifications thereof. Repeat location and group headers on a new page of your proposal and invoice. One of our somewhat newer selections, quite honestly. So now on your proposal document, if the family room or the dining room has many items that span several pages, this option will show dining room, dining room, dining room at each of the pages that include items for that particular location, simply indicating to the client that you're still continuing with items in that location. Item groups, whether or not to have the group selection shown to be used throughout the software. Groups are basically another tier or echelon in the hierarchy of your project. So you have your projects, locations, items, and components. The group goes right between the item and location itself. Some firms really enjoy that extra layer. Some would rather not see it. So we can control that here on a company-wide basis. Update proposals. That selection will have Design Manager automatically force your proposals to recalculate the pricing when you make changes to your specifications. Some firms want that type of instancy, but most prefer to actually edit the proposal itself if they want to convey those changes to the client. Location in your sidebar. when we're crafting our purchase order location? Do we want Design Manager to automatically take the location name and append it to that side mark? That's the default selection and is the one most used by design firms that I come in contact with. Require sales categories. We discussed that at the beginning of the discussion today. That's forcing the users to input a sales category on their item window and other areas throughout the software, essentially making them use the classification that we've devised for our goods and services to really hone the accounting as we've decided upon. Require manager or designer when you're crafting or creating a new project. Do you want the user to input that a employee on each of the projects? Require journals, an accounting option that forces the accounting entry individual to print a pre-posting journal prior to allowing them to post. In other words, there's forcing to have a document printed for their records prior to actually having any transactions processed. One, they may have those reviewed first by a controller or senior member, or two, just for documentation purposes themselves. Here are our user date 1 and 2. These are our quote unquote wildcard dates. Design Manager has dozens of dates that we track automatically throughout the software for you, but we've even have 2 extra ones that may represent milestones that you want to track. Your company has a business flow that has dates that we haven't yet thought of or are important to you. You can customize those here. What's the default client deposit percentage? A default shipping location. We have our unit of measure list, another recent addition to your Pro Cloud, where you can customize your unit of measure list to whatever your needs are, and that will automatically be listed throughout the software, but most notably on your specification windows right there. So whatever particular unit of measure that you need that we don't have in there already, or you want to reduce your list a little bit, you have full control over doing so from our new unit of measure list. And lastly, our shipping cost. This is in conjunction with our new whiteboard feature and our product clipper. When you're using the product clipper on your vendor's website, freight may be available or listed for you there, or some type of shipping charge. When that is brought in through the clipping tool, Design Manager will then associate it with a particular component type, usually freight, but we give you the ability to choose so as well. The other options for your proposal, invoice, and purchase order are all discussed in depth on the document styles webinar, which we saw, and the individual webinars for proposal, invoices, etc., which we can see under our project management course for proposals, project management course 1, pardon me, and our accounting course 2 for client invoices. So all of those have their own array, their own discussion on a variety of other webinars. And with that, that brings us to the end of our somewhat lengthy discussion on the company available options and settings. I hope that I presented many of the helpful company settings and defaults that can further really hone your Pro Cloud to your company's specific needs. Remember, you can always access the Pro Cloud help with just a quick click of the button for a refresher on any of these particular settings. And with that, I thank you all for joining today's discussion, and I hope you attend another of our free webinars in the near future. Take care and have a great day.